Hello everyone. In this video, we'll be looking at how to create formulas to calculate water bills for residents at the Green Park Villas. If you look at this exercise, you'll notice that the first row is the heading of the exercise. The same thing goes with the second row, and the third and fourth row, we do have column headings. Now, on the first column here, these are residents' names. And we do have here previous water usage, we have present water usage, and we have these cells empty or columns empty. Now the goal is to complete the amount due for the residents. We want to find out how much they are supposed to pay for the month of January to June 2025. And this cannot be calculated if we do not have these sections or these cells completed. Now, this side, we have service charge. This is the amount for the service charge, which is 45 cents. And the water cost here is 55 cents. And then we have here the VAT. So in this calculation, we'll be introducing what is called the absolute referencing. I'll get to explain that when it's time to use the absolute referencing. So let's start off with completing the column water used. The good thing is that we do have the previous water usage and present water usage. So from there, we can go ahead and complete these other columns. Now to calculate for the water used, I'm going to create a formula for water used. So I'm going to start here with my equal sign. I'll click on the present water used and then I'll say minus previous water usage. Then I press on my keyboard enter, or I go to the formula bar and click that point, enter. So it's that easy. Now we have water used for this particular resident. So I'm going to use the autofill handle to copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. So I'll go to the fill handle, click hold, and copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. Now in cell E5, this is service charge. We're going to create a formula to calculate for the service charge. Bear in mind here in cell B16, the service charge here is 45 cents. So we'll be creating a formula to calculate for the service charge. And we will be using service charge based on the water used. Now to create a formula, I'm going to start with the equal sign. And then I'll click on the water used and multiply that with the service charge. So I'll say multiplied by. Now this is my service charge, which is 45 cents. So I'm going to click on that B16. So that's my formula. And then I'll press the enter key on the keyboard. Okay, so this is the value that we have. And we're going to use the fill handle to copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. Click hold and copy down. What's going on? Why are we having zeros? Now this brings us to what we call absolute referencing. Let's find out why we are having zeros in these other cells. Now if I click in the first, which is the E5, look at the formula bar, we have D5 multiplied by B16. Now remember the service charge here is B16, which is here. So the service charge must not change. Now, when I click on the E6, if you look at the formula bar there, you will notice that we have D6 multiplied by B17. The service charge has changed. Remember, service charge is supposed to be B16, which must not change. So that's why we have that value there. Now, if I click here, go back to this point, see our service charge there, B16 has changed to B18, and B18 is VAT. That is also wrong. Now, when we look at this point, go to the formula bar, you would also see there that the service charge has changed to B19. And what is in B19? Look here, there is nothing here in B19. So B19 is empty. That's why we have 0 there. So if I click on that point, B20, this is B20, it is empty. So that's why we have all the zeros. So if I click here, go to the formula bar, you would see that this value changed to B25, and when we scroll further down, you see that right from B19 downwards, there is nothing there. So that's why we have these values coming out as 0. So right from this point to that point, the values are wrong because our service charge must not change. Now that is where we introduce absolute referencing. All right, so we're going to delete from E6 down to E14 because they are wrong values. Okay, so I'll take that off. And this is where we introduce absolute referencing. In Excel, an absolute reference is used to lock a cell or range of cells in a formula so that it doesn't change when that formula is being copied to the other cells or moved to other cells. So how do you lock the formula? To lock the formula, you have to introduce the $ before and after the column letter. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Now in E5, the formula is over there. Now we're going to introduce the $, which is before and after the column letter. Remember, we do not want the service charge to change. Now the service charge here is in B16. So we go back to this formula bar. I'm going to introduce the $ before and after the column letter. Then press the enter key on my keyboard. So if I go there, what we have just done is to lock the cell address B16 so that when we copy this formula down to the rest of the cells, it does not change. I'm going to go to the fill handle, click hold, and copy the formula down to the rest of the cells like we have always done. Can you now see? So let's see what changed here. Now, if I'm going to pick different cells randomly, so if I go to E6 and click on E6, this is D6 multiplied by B16. Can you see B16 did not change? Now, randomly choose another one. You can see in the formula bar, B16 is still there, it didn't change. Now, let's go to the last one, which is E14. Now, you can still see that we have our B16 didn't change. Why? Because we locked down that cell address so it doesn't change when we copy our formula to the rest of the cells. Now that is what is called absolute referencing. Okay, so the next thing we want to calculate is the water cost. So I'm going to click on F5. Now we'll create a formula to calculate water cost on the number of water used. Now we do have the column, which is water used column. When you look down here, you'll see that the water cost here is 55 cents. So we'll create a formula on the water used. So first, I'm going to start with my equal sign, and then I'll click on my water used, all right, and multiply that by water cost. Now that I have my formula here, I will just press the enter key on my keyboard, go back and copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. Okay, I'm sure at this point you know why we are having zeros. We have to make the formula absolute at this point. So if I click here, you'll see that the B17 has changed. From that point, the water cost here is what? On B17 and is not supposed to change. Now when I click at this point, you'll see we have that as B26. If I scroll further down, you see there's nothing from B19 downwards. So we're supposed to make the formula absolute. So I'm going to delete everything here. Go back to the first formula and make it absolute. So I'll go back to my formula bar and introduce a $ before and after the column letter. So I'll put in my $ and my $ and press the enter key on the keyboard. Now that we have locked the cell address B17, we can now copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. So I'll click hold and copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. So if I click on the last cell there, which is F14, go to the formula bar, you would see that it didn't change. We have locked B17, so it doesn't change. Okay, in cell G5, we will create a formula to calculate for the VAT. And remember, the VAT will be calculated based on service charge and water cost. This part, so this group of column, these are about currency. So we will create our VAT based on that. So in this G5, we'll create a formula to calculate our VAT based on service charge and water cost. So I'll start by creating my formula and I will say equal sign. Then I'm going to say that plus, which is service charge plus worth of cost multiplied by the VAT. Now again, if I do this multiply by VAT, I just type my formula like that and come here, click on my VAT, which is 15%, then press the enter key. This value is wrong. I'm going to show you why, because you need to bear in mind BODMAS. You need to know when to introduce your brackets open and close. So I'm going to now copy this formula down to the rest of the cells. All right, so that's what we have, but the value there is wrong because the VAT only multiplied F5. So I'm going to delete everything I have there and show you the right way to create your formula. So I'll insert my equal sign to create a formula for the VAT. Open bracket, click on service charge plus worth of cost, then I close the bracket because we want to create the VAT, and the VAT is based on service charge and worth of cost. Then I'll multiply that with the VAT here, which is B18. Then press the enter key on my keyboard. If you notice that the value that we have here is different from the previous value that we had. Okay, now I'm supposed to make this formula absolute, but I'm just going to copy the formula down to the rest of the cells so that you can see what happens. Okay, click hold and drag this formula down to the rest of the cells. You see, the B18 is changing. So if I click here, go to the value here, so the formula is changing as we copy it downwards. So what we will do is to make this formula absolute. You can press your F4 key on your keyboard to make your formula absolute, or you can key in the $ manually. So I'm just going to go back to this point and type in the $ before and after the column letter. You can see that before and after the column letter. So I'll press the enter key. So I go back to that point, click hold and copy the formula down to the rest of the cells. There you go. So we have that value. So now we can calculate amount due. So I'll click there, insert my equal sign. Now amount due is calculated based on service charge, worth of cost, and the VAT. We're going to add all of these three together to get amount due for each of these residents. Different ways you can create your formula. So I'll click here, service charge plus worth of cost plus the VAT. Then I press the enter key on my keyboard. So that is the amount due for that resident. This is one way to create your formula. You can decide to use the sum function of Excel to create your formula. So I'm going to show you that. So I'll start with my equal sign, then type in the sum function. Now that's my sum. I can just double click that to insert it. So go to that point, click hold and select from E5 to G5. Now once selected, I'll close the bracket and press the enter key on the keyboard. Now when you look at that, you'll see that the value that we have is still the same value. Now I can click hold and copy that down to the rest of the cells. Okay, look at this point. We didn't copy this to the rest of the cells, so I'll complete that. Now we have all the columns computed. We have our value. So I'm going to change this set of cells. I'll change them to currency because we are working on currency. Now I selected all of that. I'm going to convert to a currency in 0 decimal places. So I'll select that, go to my home tab, go to number group, click the more arrow, choose more accounting formats. In the category section, I'll choose currency. Then come to those decimal places, I'll convert, change that to 0 decimal places. I like to choose the positive sign. And the symbol here, like I said, you can choose what type of currency that you want based on the exercise that you're working on. So let's scroll down and choose maybe the US dollars and click OK. Now, if you look there, you'll see that we've successfully converted this to a currency. So when do you use absolute referencing? You typically use absolute referencing when you want a formula to always refer to a specific cell, regardless of where the formula is copied or regardless of where the cell is located. Just like the example that you see here. there are a few things you need to know which are error types in Excel when you're creating your formula. So if you look at the side, you will see this error here. When you find this type of error, it simply means when you are trying to divide by 0. If you find that type of error when text in a formula is not recognized, when you find this, when a reference is invalid, when you create a formula and you find that type of error, when the wrong type of operand or function argument is used. So whenever you find this type of errors, please go back to your formula and try to figure out what the problem is so you can correct it. We can format this work so it looks nice. So on the first row, we're going to merge and center it across the exercise. Exercise ends on column H. Click Hold and drag to column H. Go to Home tab, Alignment Group, click the more arrow and choose Merge and Center. We'll do the same thing for row 2. Click Hold, stop at column H, go to Home tab, Alignment Group, click the more arrow, choose Merge and Center. Okay, so we'll apply a color background from row 1 to row 4. So I'll click Hold, select from row 1 to row 4, go to Home tab, Font Group, click the more arrow of Font Group and choose a color background there. Let's choose dark green accent 3, lighter 80. So I'll choose that. Okay, so let's apply tick outside border. So I'm going to select from that column A to column I and stop at that point. So what we want to do is to apply tick outside border to that range of cells or group of cells. So I go to Home tab. That is my font group. Click the more arrow of the borders and choose tick outside border. Okay, so you already know how to format your document. So we're going to end this video here and I'll see you in the next one.